learned that I better get used to having to pick between a douche and a turd sandwich because it's usually the choice I'll have.
He's going to vote!
Even though
I can if I want.
our previous start to this podcast, I don't know what technical issues is causing this, but it was hilarious. You missed a whole conversation about my Android wife, which you'll never know about because there's no going back. This is a train.
No.
We don't go in reverse, even though trains can go in reverse, but this one doesn't.
You could say it's a bit scandalous.
Oh,
That's another joke you won't get.
it's a special time, everybody. It's a special podcast.
Special podcast. Very special.
Well, let's do introductions. I have Jason Ross in the Silver Bell.
Yay. Hello.
So professional.
How'd everybody's holiday go, really quick?
Good. Just chilling. Watched A Bridge Too Far. You know, fun
It's
stuff.
a very spoopy movie for you.
I mean, you know, I imagine if you were there, it was. But
Yeah, Operation
Not
Market
for me.
Garden would have been pretty horrific, I would say. Montgomery,
it's a real
bit
bad
off more than
time.
he could chew, and he thought he was really good at this, and he was not.
Turns out they should have given it all to Patton. Oh well.
Pat knew what he was doing. There, I said it.
Yeah.
Let's armchair general past battles like we know what we're doing.
Yeah, I definitely know more than Field Marshal Montgomery. He's an idiot compared to me.
Moron. One of my
I
favorite
would have,
videos.
not only would I have saved the campaign in Africa, I would have won.
There's a huge amount of like video content of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan and stuff. And there was some video of these guys being ambushed by some Afghani soldiers or Taliban soldiers in like the mountains. And there was a comment I read underneath where the guy was like, I've played enough shooters to know that you're supposed to use your iron sights to aim, this idiot. And everyone's like, who are you talking to?
Oh my God.
I know how to war better because I played a lot of COD.
Eh.
But of course, that's how it works. We should have 13-year-olds be the generals because they played Call of Duty against a bunch of other 13-year-olds.
They definitely know how to soldier better than people who actually do it.
I played in the thousands of hours of Hearts of Iron. When somebody posted on the Hearts of Iron forum, if we were given control of Italy, could we have ran Italy better than Mussolini? And everyone was like, no, it's not a one-to-one translation. Like, there's so much more to managing a country than Hearts of Iron portrays. You know, economics and trade and production and like it's so much more complicated than playing admittedly a fairly complicated war simulator. A bunch of Hearts of Iron players could not manage Italy better than Mussolini. I'm sorry, despite the fact I don't speak Italian.
Lord. Babbity beepy boopy. I would have just been doing that everywhere.
Ross is fluent Italian.
Beepity boppy, babbity beepy boopy. And they would have got it.
I know exactly what he's saying.
Yep.
I
Yeah,
was gonna
Jason
ask.
does speak
What do
Italian.
you say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Translate.
flawless
He loves it.
accent.
He likes pizza.
Yeah.
He does this better than I do.
Jason, did
Yeah.
did your
To have a
kids
conversation.
did your kids go trick or treating?
My youngest son did.
Oh.
The others, I mean, my oldest two are in college, so no, they didn't go trick or treating.
Got to suplex your kids.
Oh,
teach
no.
them
You
right.
coulda.
That's weird.
It was kind of weird. So we do have like little kids in the neighborhood and stuff, but this year it was like nobody
It was
was out
dead.
trick or treating.
It was dead.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yep.
Except I heard from a bunch of people when I was sitting in class the day of Halloween talking about going trick or treating, and they were serious.
Oh, good lord.
Yeah, but college is
Yeah.
full of a bunch of like adult children that will never. They're all Peter
Yeah,
Pan. they're all perpetually never grow uppy.
We'll never forget seeing that furry sitting in ecology.
What? Like in the suit? What are you talking about right now?
I'm not kidding.
In the suit?
Halloween, someone dressed as a furry in the frickin' suit.
wow, that's
This is the
dedication.
most upsetting thing I've heard in a while. I just
What is the joke that the biggest problem is we got rid of bullying? What was the Bill Burr's
Yeah.
joke?
good
Mhm.
lord. Horrendous.
Now that we've disparaged furries, it's time we talk about being nice to each other.
Nah.
Well, look, everybody, we are we are a handful of days, a couple of days away from a major election in America. And we're not necessarily, I mean, culturally, we're an American podcast, but if you're outside of America, you're more than welcome to, we're more accessible to everybody, I would say. But that being said, we do have a massive election coming up, and it's very exciting, and everybody's really ramped up and calling doomsday on the events about to happen.
Ah.
And strictly not as a political podcast. And I know I say that all the time and then say something minorly political. But we don't really weigh in on politics, so to speak. We weigh in on pop culture, and where pop culture crosses with politics, which it unfortunately does all of the time, this is where we end up. And I thought it would be interesting to sit back, because, you know, believe it or not, being nerdy or geeky also involves more than just video games or movies or comics or whatever.
Huh?
I'm really nerdy about things like history and political science and political philosophy and also like I'm a full human and I run the gamut of interests outside of playing. I played a bunch of Mario this week, by the way. I beat Mario 3 and it was great. It's just a good time. It's a good time.
That is
Love
an
it.
awesome game. Mario
Yes.
3. If you guys haven't, the thing is that one came out years ago. So you know, people are younger, haven't played it. Get on Switch. Get the SNES. No, that was on the NES. Excuse me. Play it. It's a great version of Mario.
It might be peak
The only
old
Mario
school
I knew.
Mario. You know?
Oh yeah.
I'm a little bit iffy about the boss fight. This is beside the point I'm trying to make. So I have this personal political theory I'm going to try and use as sort of an allegory for how politics work. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the physics problem of the three-body problem. I'm not talking about the fictional book. I'm talking about the actual problem in physics.
I am not familiar.
In
remind me what
astrophysics.
it is again. I've heard it, but I
Silver
can't
might
think of what it is.
Silver might know what it is. Yeah, regardless.
Nope.
Nope. So when it comes to astrophysics and you're calculating things like orbit and mass and gravitational pull and stuff, and you have two objects of equal mass, you can calculate accurately how they're going to interact. So like the moon and the Earth, well, they're not equal mass, but you know what I mean? Like two
Right.
celestial bodies, you can calculate accurately. We can calculate accurately how we interact with the moon and the Earth, or the Earth and the sun. The three-body problem is a mathematical problem in astrophysics where if you add a third celestial body of equal mass, the variability and chaos that ensues in trying to calculate, sort of predict model-wise what's going to happen, is actually physically impossible. And I'm not saying we can't calculate accurately enough because we don't have computer models. No, it causes a literal chaos in the math problem that is literally unsolvable in order to predict what's going to happen when three bodies interact with one another. Hence, the three-body problem is actually an unsolvable problem. Because it's like, oh, well, how do they interact? Is one going to pass between the other one? Is one going to rotate around and then the other will rotate around? It literally causes such havoc in the mathematics that's an unsolvable problem. Okay. I liken politics in general to the three-body problem in astrophysics. We like to look at the world from our own individual, I guess, moral and ethical stances. And when we view the world, we think that if only we were in charge, or if only my ideology were in charge, everything would be fixed. The world would be better. Right. We just need to fight to put my people in charge. What I'm telling you is because of the variability of human beings, that there is no such thing as a perfect solution. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because of how complex human beings are and whatnot, as we tend to view politics as if only the people I agree with can take the reins of power, we can create the world that's perfect and everything will be great. My argument is no such world exists. And you might be going, oh, that's a nerdy podcast. Why are you bringing that up? Bear with me. The reason why I'm bringing up is that this three-body problem superimposed onto the world of politics is that politics simply is chaos. Human beings are chaos, and they're an unsolvable problem. And you might be looking at the election down the road and thinking to yourself, things are going to spin off out of control. If this person is in charge, the worst possible outcome is going to happen, and everybody's going to die, and it's going to be chaos. Rampant, like literally every possible hyperbolic thing you can think of is going to happen, where literal guy with tiny mustache is going to march down the street and the Fourth Reich will ensue and everything or cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria, and the world is going to fall apart. You can't predict what the future will hold. And I understand when, with a very contentious election, everybody's going to predict doom and gloom. And what I'm telling you is the future isn't set or certain or predictable. And if you think you can calculate where the world is going, you don't. You can't. It's far more. And the three-body problem is talking about three celestial bodies interacting with one another. You're now looking at millions and millions of people interacting with one another and bouncing off one another. There will be no perfect calculation as to how the world's supposed to function. Oftentimes, the biggest mistake people use is they look at the world through their own bubble, where they think my bubble tells me that if we all just got along and interacted the way I do with my friends and my coworkers and the people around me, then the world would be a great place if we just only did the things that I think we should be doing. And the problem is you discount that no matter what you do, you live in a world with people who disagree with you. And I know, ideologically speaking, you think that if only the right people are in charge, then everybody would agree that this is the best way to... That's never going to happen. And I can't emphasize this enough. It will never happen where everybody agrees about the same thing at the same time. Ever. Never, ever, ever. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this is because instead of trying to hamstring everybody and drag them into a world that you think it should be, that the goal should be is to learn how to interact with one another despite disagreement. Because you're going to have to live in this world and this country, however the election plays out, with people who disagree with you after the election. And guess what? The people who disagree with you before the election don't go away. when the election's over. They're still around and they still disagree with you. And perhaps the best course of action isn't to ramrod over everybody how you feel and view the world, but the best course of action is to learn how to get along with people you vehemently disagree with. Because guess what? There will never be a perfect utopia. I know this is shocking. There's a hope.
What?
That we view down the road that eventually we can create a perfect system where everybody lives happily and what human beings aren't built for this. And this soapbox I'm giving is essentially to encourage people to realize that guess what? The people you think have horrific political viewpoints still exist after the election's over. They don't go away. They're still around. And no matter how much you wish to impose your political views upon the rest of mankind, they're still going to be here when the election's over. Because...
Not if I can help it.
Well, no, wait until the great purge occurs. But this never goes away. That it literally in psychology, they can predict based upon your type of personality how you're going to vote. Like people naturally are just going to have opposites. It's like that joke of like we just naturally every generation has like counterculture people. And forever it was always counterculture to like traditional conservative values. And it's like, hey, guess what? Counterculture is now against like the left wing because they've been in charge for a while. And it's like, why are younger people moving more conservatives? It's like, because that's what counterculture does. They look at who's in charge and they're like, this is bullcrap. I'm going to do something different. And because that's how the world works. And instead of opposing your worldview on everybody else, maybe the goal should be to learn how to live with people who you disagree with. You know, I always often hear people say, it's like, well, this is the most contentious the country's ever been. I mean, it's very contentious. It's not the most contentious the country's ever been. But it's like, we'll never get along and yada, yada, yada. And it's like, we need to learn how to unite together. Anybody who says that is implying within that message, unite together with me. Yeah. We need to learn to unite behind my point of view. That's what they mean when they say that. They don't mean unite and then find common ground and then disagree or agree, but learn to live together. They mean we need to unite behind my political perspective so that we can get my agenda pushed forward and accomplished.
Well, nobody wants to live in the utopia that their opponents would create.
Right.
Because that wouldn't be a utopia for them. And so, like you said, we need to unite to get things accomplished that benefit society. But because everybody has a different view of what would benefit society, you're never going to be able to unite behind these ideas. Because my idea of what would benefit society is not your idea of what would benefit society.
Well, everybody always used democracy incorrectly, where they're like, oh, well, it's the will of the masses, and we will make... First of all, the masses frequently get things wrong. But in reality, democracy... Because people think democracy is, oh, well, the natural good, everybody will come to the same conclusion. And that's not true. Democracy, by its very nature, is contentious. It is headbutting.
Yes.
It is working if we are picking fights over small things. And that major decision should come from a consensus of the group, not from one person stealing the reins of power from the other and then imposing their will upon the rest. I'm not here to weigh in on whether or not you should vote for one person or another. I would encourage you to vote. I would encourage you to make a thoughtful voting decision. What I am here to say is, no matter what we do, your neighbors are still going to be here. They're not going to go away. And so maybe demonizing each other and tearing each other apart and then assuming that if only you were in charge, that everybody would just agree with you and they would see how right you are is not how the world works. The politics in general and humanity is the three-body problem. It is an incalculable physics issue that will spin off into chaos because humans are chaos. I mean, look at any scientific study. If you look at any scientific study, by the sheer effort of observing the study, you change the study. It is such an issue with statistics, whereas if you're looking, like it is so problematic with people who actually collect like statistical analysis, that even if you approach statistical analysis, if you want a certain outcome, it will literally affect the numbers you collect. Life is chaos. There are problems we will never solve. And hopefully the goal is to learn to live together, which was essentially the American experiment of self-rule. Can man rule himself? And we can learn to get along. It's funny. There's a really good essay by George Orwell where he talks about the movement in Germany in the 1930s with a little mustache man, and how everybody's like, I don't see why anyone would follow that man, why anyone would think that way. And his conclusion was, and it's a really good essay, I'd recommend everybody read it. His conclusion was, because human beings, that there's more to human beings than simply wanting good things or wanting nice houses. That there is an element to human beings that hopes for something bigger than themselves, that wants to fly and wants to root for their team and wants to do these sorts of things. We are all not going to disagree, and we need to learn to mitigate the worst parts of our personalities and try not to demonize the other side and turn them into boogeymen that are here to destroy the world and tear everything down, because your neighbors aren't going away. They're still going to be there, and they're still going to disagree with you. You're like, well, now that my person's in charge, everything will be right with the world. And it's like, guess what? Your neighbors still hate your political perspective, and they still live next door. And the goal then should have, perhaps, that we have a union behind certain values, and we learn how to disagree with one another without like horrific violence and murder and going at each other's throats. And I would encourage everybody to view whatever paranoia you have about the coming election, whoever ends up winning, that you're still going to have to live with a world with people who disagree, and eventually the other side will be in charge, and they're going to do the same things to you that you're going to do to them. And so perhaps America in general is the experiment of learning to get along with people you disagree with, because you're never going to create a perfect world where your ideology is just in charge, because that three-body problem is not a solvable issue. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think everyone wants to be, because I noticed this a lot with, I mean, ever since college, but especially since COVID. Anytime anything happens in the news that has the potential to be the thing that starts whatever other thing, like they want to be the one that notices Czechoslovakia being given to the bad man.
The Sudetenland
is the start of World War II. Yeah, right. Like we all, like everybody wants to be that person that saw it first, saw it coming first, and that ends up creating a very paranoid sort of atmosphere. I mean, COVID really did this, and anything happening in the geopolitical sphere, good lord. And when I think about it, I saw it too. I mean, back a couple presidents further, but it's just, don't do that. Like, number one, that's insane. Like, that's like, it's a crazy way to live your life, to be constantly scrutinizing everything you see to make sure if it's really happening, if the happenings are happening. Like, that's just,
if the plants
pay attention,
are
but just live your life.
Encouraging people to kill themselves.
Yeah, like, just, pay
No.
attention. Like, don't be an idiot, but just live your life. Just keep doing your thing. Like, give your neighbors some cookies, be friendly. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, this doesn't, like, just relax. Because 90% of people, one way or the other, are fine. Like, they're just people. Like, you might disagree with them. You may agree with them on more things than you think. Just,
yeah.
And I say this as a surly douche, and because I am.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
Like it's okay. It's okay, everybody. I promise. Like, whatever it is, it's
It'll be
probably
okay.
not as big of a deal as you're thinking. Yeah.
The thing is that humans tend to be inherently selfish, and so they tend to want things that benefit them the most. Or I see this as, like Greta Thunberg, for instance. She proposes to be doing something that's beneficial to humanity, but it's like she can't do something that takes the focus off of her. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so because of things like that, we're all self-interested. We all want the thing that we think is the best. And so, like you said, even if your guy or girl gets put in charge, the other people aren't suddenly going to be lining up to follow the president. They're just not. They're going to oppose whatever actions are the president is trying to put in place to the best of their ability. And so we end up having a stalemate almost. Now, yeah, if your guy is in charge, it may be easier for your viewpoint to be propagated through the country through laws that get enacted and things, but you're still going to have that disagreement. You're still going to have the people that are, when it's their turn, they're going to try to undo what you did, if you are able to even accomplish anything. So I mean, that's kind of how I see it. There's a certain amount of wisdom in what I heard a conservative commentator, I forget who it was, but he said that the framers of the Constitution, basically they wanted to have this back and forth. They wanted to have this disagreement and stuff. They wanted it to be difficult to get laws changed, because at that point you're actually taking the time to evaluate whether or not something is a good idea. I just don't think people are really doing that right now.
No, I mean, and we don't need to go down the road of whether or not we're making good political decisions, because this is a nerdy podcast. The message essentially is you're going to have to live with your neighbors, whoever wins. Perhaps we need to calm the hell down. You do
Very
have a point where essentially once again, we're not necessarily doing a thing about America, but essentially the goal of creating America and the goal of the freedom of speech itself, the First Amendment, wasn't, believe it or not, it didn't exist so that you could say awful things to people. It existed so that you could have political discussions and push back and forth against one another when it came to ideas. That's essentially what its essential purpose was. There was contention from the founding of this country, and there's going to be contention till the ending of it. Hopefully not soon. From the very beginning, we disagreed about everything and how the country should be run and what. And guess what? If you believe in certain things, you should support them and go out and champion them and vote for those things. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, no matter what happens, your neighbors are still going to be around, and demonizing each other isn't going to solve anything. And we still live in a world where we're going to have opposites no matter what. I don't think I clarified as well as I could why I brought up George Orwell's essay. The prevailing theory in the West, in Western culture, was that if we intertwine economically, that we would have sort of a more peaceful world, because it would enrich everybody. We'd be able to trade and get better goods and get nicer things and get better houses and a cooler car. And the theory always was that the more intertwined economically we are, the less violent the world would become, because everybody would be benefiting collectively, so to speak. We'd all be getting better things and nicer stuff through a free trade model. And then we had things like...
I heard that.
Well, and then we had things like Putin invading Ukraine. And then it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. All of these trade embargoes on him, it damaged his economy, it damaged their reputation across the world, all these other things. And it's like, well, maybe not everybody views the world the same way you do. Now, I would venture to say that Putin's goals are nefarious, but it also belies the idea that other people have goals outside what you think everybody's goals should be. And he saw this idea of a more collected, united Russia. He saw Ukraine as a part of what they should be. He wanted to make a stronger, great Russian empire again, however bad that would be. And then guess what? Places like China and India and other places view the world differently than the West does. And we presuppose that everybody has the same template on we all want the same things. Believe it or not, everybody doesn't want the same things. We all want different things. Everybody thinks differently. And a lot of it has to do with the values you grow up with, your ethics are shockingly culture. And you're going to have to live in a world where people have different views unless you create some sort of horrific totalitarian landscape where you superimpose your ideas on everybody and cram it down their throats, which is what some people are trying to do currently in popular media. Sorry, Jason, you were going to intercede.
Well, I was going to say, one thing I kind of disagree on the everybody wants different things. If you're going from a country perspective, I would say that each country wants to be sovereign in itself, and they want to be economically prosperous. Okay? But the idea behind how we're going to accomplish our economic prosperity and how we're going to be sovereign unto ourselves is different because of the different value sets that they have. Does that make sense?
Yes. However, there are examples of people who do not want to be economically prosperous. There are tribes in Africa that look at modern society and think it's bad, that we are living depressing, horrible lives, and they want nothing to do with it. And they want to live their peaceful lives, hunting and being, having their families and whatnot. We always impose our ethics and our values on everybody else. We presuppose everybody wants the same things, but not everybody wants the same thing.
I guess maybe I would say that they want to prosper. Maybe not economically. Maybe that's what I should have said. Because I assume that those tribes want to prosper. Not necessarily but their idea of prosperity may not be our idea of prosperity.
Sure.
You know, their idea of being prosperous may not be the house with the white picket fence, but
or even having a car at all.
Yeah, exactly. But they may have an idea of prosperity that they want to pursue. And so I guess that's more what I was trying to get at, that they want to be, they want to be able to choose and guide their own destiny, and at the same time they want to prosper, however that prosperity looks to them. And because of their mindset, their values and what they place most value upon, their prosperity and their ideas of how to attain it then become different. Because China puts a lot of and not just China, but the Oriental world, it's a lot of focus on honor and respect and things like that, where we may not have that same mindset, which means that to us it doesn't make sense the way that they pursue their prosperity. And same with Russia. Russia has a very different idea of what it means to be prosperous and what it means to be sovereign. And so when we look at it and we say, well, why is Russia invading Ukraine? Don't they understand that that's just going to make the rest of the world hate them? And it's like, well, they want to be prosperous their way and how they see that they're going to be prosperous.
Sure. And that's what's so fast about cultures is cultures have different, that's why cultures are great. I would prefer if we don't homogenize everybody's culture. I prefer we have different cultures. Right. Not to go down the rabbit hole that we've already gone down. Once again, the idea is that no matter what happens, even if you take over everything in the government and your point of view is in charge and you start changing everything the way you want it to, guess what? There will still be people living next door to you who disagree with that. And the point isn't, let's impose my values on everybody else. The point is understanding and coming to the conclusion that no matter what happens, you're going to have to live in a world with people who disagree with you. And I don't think most people always have this brinkmanship view of politics where we got to push things until my point of view takes over. And what they don't realize is politics is really the interaction with disparate points of view. And then coming to some sort of consensus, and then that consensus, because everybody's like, everybody wants the same things I want. It's like, no, they don't. They really don't. Not everybody. A lot of people might, especially if they live in your neighborhood. But we all have different views of the world, and we're all going to have to get along and live with one another. You don't have to like their stuff. I'm not saying you're going to have to, but you're going to have to learn to live together. It's funny. Everybody always brings up the revolution and stuff. It's like, oh, they united. It's like they didn't like each other.
No.
Like the South did not like the North. But they had to figure out a way to come. And that's why the government is structured the way that it is. We created a political system so that a bunch of people who disagree are able to function together, because one side is afraid the other side is going to impose their will upon them, and vice versa. How about we create a system where we can't force each other to live the way we want to live? And the hope is we have a collective culture and value system that keeps us united. But there's going to be a lot of disparate perspectives about how we go about government. And it's going to sway back and forth. You're never going to get to the point where you're in charge over everything. You're just going to have to live with the fact that other people with different points of view want the government to function differently, and you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Everybody predicting the end of the world and the rise of the Reich if certain individuals are in charge. I'm going to tell you right now, that's not going to happen. You know why? Because you and half of the country out there disagree with it and are not going to let that happen. I won't let that happen because I disagree with anything that would create something similar to that. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Calm down. Everything's going to be fine. This is my message for today. Silver, closing thoughts?
Vote for whoever you think is right. Honestly. Yeah, we may have opposing viewpoints on it, but choose who you think is best.
Is my message encouraging enough? Did I get through to the kids?
I think the kids definitely
Yes.
heard it. Yeah.
Our massive
Kids heard it, and yeah, the kids heard it. Some of them are being stupid about it, but they heard it.
They're getting angry. We're going to exterminate
They're getting angry
the
for
other
no
people.
reason.
We're going to get rid of the other people. Guess what? Disagreement is part of it. That it's supposed to be there. We're supposed to disagree.
I always liked when people said, if so and so gets elected, I'm leaving the country.
No, yeah.
And then they never did.
Yep. So funny.
Like, that was such an empty threat when you gave it. We all knew it was never going to happen.
Well, and it's also like, who cares? Like, I don't interact with you. Like, you're just celebrity man. You'll still be celebrity man. Like, you're just going to be somewhere else. Like, I don't care. It's not like you're my family.
Well, it's just the rhetoric has been so ridiculous. I saw who was Charlie Kirk was talking on a college campus, and somebody asked him, "What drug are you going to overdose on when Kamala Harris gets elected?" And he's like, "I'm not going to overdose on a drug." Like, his conclusion was, "I'm going to keep fighting for values I agree with," and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, why do you immediately assume people are going to be so devastated if their person doesn't get elected that they're going to start mass suicide? And we're all going to start just... Let's calm down the rhetoric. Hopefully everything's going to be fine. Violence is never the answer.
When some moron asks that, the immediate follow-up should be, well, what are you going to be overdosing on when your guy doesn't win?
Well, he countered, and the other guy's like, "Oh, I'll probably move to the Netherlands or something." And it's like, well, then you're not.
They won't take you.
No, they won't.
Number
They
one.
won't take
Nope.
you. So everybody,
Well, not only won't they take you, but you won't move.
no one's going to move. So everybody, in the spirit of getting along, and hey, disagreement's the good part. We're supposed to disagree and have little fights over things. We're supposed to disagree. Just don't demonize each other. The world ain't going to be a better place when you do that. And even if you demonize the other people to such a vitriolic degree that they're just horrific people who should be exterminated, and then you take over, they're still not going away, and they're not going to think better of their choices because you won an election. They're probably going to be more annoyed that next time around. So I'm just,
really want to
because
live
this
in a place-
this podcast is so close to the election, I felt it worth, because we talk about pop culture and the election's part of what's going on, it was probably a good idea to sit and have a chat and tell everybody to just get along, everybody. At any rate, let's do stuff.
The Distracted Gamer Podcast's big steaming pile of news dump.
Yeah, it's a special week, everybody. Hey, guess what? Everything
Huh?
that we've been revolving around, that anyone has ever talked about ever, that everybody's super excited about, guess what? Before we get into that, I'm going to bring up, because we're talking about politics and everything in pop culture is just surrounded about politics. I don't know why this isn't popping up. Where is, and pop up. And no pop up. Let's move you down. Gosh dang it. News article. There we go.
I know can see
So-
in the Discord.
Well, I'll bring it up in the Discord for the children.
Okay.
For the
I just want to
little-
make sure.
little children. Yeah, Ross likes to participate and see the images. He's a visual person.
I need the pictures.
You get
Sorry.
it?
Got it.
All right. So the members of the Avengers all got together and did a campaign thing for Kamala Harris, and it wasn't received well by people who disagree with that political perspective.
Really? Was it
Yeah.
now?
The one thing we constantly rail against in pop culture is being too political. And then it just alienates you or your product or whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's your movie or your video game. And I know you care a lot about what's going on. I get it. Just don't be surprised when half the country reacts negatively to a massive Avengers thing about voting for one candidate or another, because then you're just going to anger half the country. Why do you think so much of the country hates Hollywood? Because they feel it necessary to impose on them their political perspectives. And so now, instead of an actor in a movie I like, you're now a political actor imposing your will and your political perspective into the work you do and whatnot. And if that's what you want to be, you're more than welcome to do that. But that's how I'm going to treat you. So,
Right.
shockingly. Yes, it was very cringeworthy. It was this big Kamala Harris push with the members of the Avengers. It was really awkward.
Shades of Imagine during COVID.
Yeah, imagine. Zachary Levi, on the other hand, came out with sort of a right-wing perspective on things, and everybody got angry with him. And it's like, yeah, because he's weighing in politically, and now the left-wing aren't going to respond to it positively, and they're going to view him as a right-wing influence, and they're not going to like it. So you're more than welcome to have your political perspective, and if you feel strongly about what's happening, maybe you should. Just don't be shocked when you anger half the country because they're pissed off with your political perspective. Shockingly. Hey, guess what, everybody? Dragon Age is here. The much expected, maligned,
God.
everybody's shocked it was. Oh my gosh, we've all been talking about how bad it's going to be. It's super woke, everybody, blah, blah, blah. Despite the hyperbole.
So excited for Purple Magic game.
Purple Magic game. Despite the hyperbole, what is this game about? I've trolled. So I don't have a personal view of the game besides clips. I haven't played it. This is based upon reviews and content and the things I've consumed from other content creators. The gameplay seems to be somewhat fun. It seems to be very buggy, and there are a lot of problems, and the storytelling is really bad. That's the consensus I've been able to come to. Now you might ask yourself, what do you mean by really bad? Now, I'm going to have a lot of examples of quote unquote woke stuff in the game that looks bad, and you're going to go, oh, this looks awful, I don't want to play this game. And you're more than what? As far as bad storytelling, that's not inherently bad if the game is woke. But I'll get into that. So the game came out, and there are quite a few clips that have come out sort of as examples as to what your expectation is in the game. And for a medieval game that's set in a fantasy universe, there have been a lot in the game. There is a lot of gender politics conversations where one of the characters comes out as non-binary and they insist everybody calls them they, them, which is a weird thing to insert into a medieval fantasy genre. There's a lot of conversation about essentially modern American gender politics. And you might go, oh, why do you classify as American? Because the whole world doesn't agree with the gender politics stuff, the way that America is doing things. So yes, this has been a part of it. There's a lot of very modern political jargon and conversation. There's a big controversy in German. Silver might be able to weigh in on this. German doesn't have non-binary gendered language. Everything conjugates gendered, if I recall.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Everything.
Right.
Has to do with
the German translation, apparently transgender individuals have been imposing aspects into the German language of non-binary in a non-binary way, and the entire game is translated in that way, where they add E's to the back of everything, and they so yes, somebody has imposed the new modern take into the German language of redoing German so that it can include non-binary conjugation.
Oh God!
Throughout the entire game,
Latinx.
by the way.
Yeah.
There's a famous moment where one character
that snake's nose. She's still holding the ruby in her other hand.
Misgenders another
Maker's panties. I was so
and
proud.
goes and does push-ups to apologize.
Shit. They're still holding it. Sorry.
What are you doing?
Pulling a barb.
Oh. Okay.
This is her
A barb.
apologizing for
Tradition in
misgendering
the
one of the
Lords
other
of Fortune.
characters. I'm presenting all of this to give you an idea of the type of politics this game seems to want to display center stage. All right? We've already had that large conversation about the top scars and the whatnot and the character creation. It is a very politically left-wing show, left-wing game involving very politically left-wing politics. And if this is up your alley, you're more than welcome to play it. I will not be playing this game.
Gonna waste my money.
Yeah, we could go down the rabbit hole of all of the weird dialogue and stuff. The reason why I bring up it's poorly written. So for an RPG, oftentimes, and this is one that's displayed very well in Baldur's Gate 3, is that the vast amount of role-playing possibilities to be a bad guy or a good guy or say good things or bad good things. You could kill like companions. You could save companions. It's such an open game. It gives you such a possibility of role-playing that it's just open infinitely. The big criticism about the storytelling in the new Dragon Age is that you are displayed as the heroic character that's going to save the world or whatever. And you can't play outside of that. And you might think, well, you get dialogue options. Well, apparently no matter what you pick, you always display yourself as sort of the good character. So in dialogue options, dialogue options really don't matter. And that's been the big criticism, is there's really no role playing. That the only negative thing you can really do to your companions is to just not do their side quests, which have retribution to some degree, but you still talk like you're the good person and you only have good options when it comes to dialogue. So there's been a lot of criticism with this when it comes to like the gendered language stuff. You can't say, oh, I disagree with that. The only option is to agree with calling them by their gendered pronouns that they agree with. You can't negatively impose yours. Even if you're trying to play a bad guy or impose like a bad guy perspective, you still have to be polite and then use their correct gendered pronouns in the game. And that the big criticism is the writing forces you down this pathway of playing the character in a way that makes you good the way the game thinks you should be good.
I mean, there's that famous, was it Mass Effect 2, where you punch that reporter in the face if you want to do the renegade option.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if you took that, like, well, no, you don't want to actually punch a reporter, a journalist. Like, that is so lame. That is the lamest thing, especially considering in the previous Dragon Age games, you could be a real bastard if you wanted to be.
Yes, you could. In Star Wars: The Old Republic, I think you play as the Inquisitor, you have a companion that has like a shot caller because they're like a slave. And if they speak out, every dialogue you have with that character, you can choose to shock their collar whenever they speak and you don't want them to speak. Because you're a piece of shit Sith Inquisitor. Like, that's who you are.
Yep.
That is not an option that allows you to do this. And I suppose the problem is when you have very political language in a game like this, they can't have you pushing back against what seems to be the goal to lecture the player about about the politics of the creators of this game. And if you can play a character that disagrees with that, then it defeats the purpose of them lecturing to you about the politics that they're putting into the game. So you can't play a bad character who disagrees with everything. You just have to play the character they want you to play, who agrees with the gendered politics and has no problem with characters that you might personally dislike. And that makes for a not very fun RPG, because it's not really an RPG. You're just playing an action game that follows the story they want you to follow. Why even have because they have the dialogue wheel, and it's like, why you didn't have that if you can't just be a bad guy? Every option is like, hey, bro, I like it a lot. I like it kind of a lot.
God, that's so dumb.
Yeah.
I mean, disregarding everything else, anything that could be even remotely political, that in and of itself would make me not want to pay money for that game, at least full price. Because that sucks. That is so lame.
It's very lame.
Especially, and by the way, a really bold choice considering we just had, was it last year, the year before, Baldur's Gate 3, and then not too long before that, you had Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Which, despite the fact it is now a very good game, people still have, some people, it's a little bit of a polarized game. I think the majority all agree that game is really good now. But just even if you didn't like, at least there's options. Even if you didn't like the game at launch because it admittedly had issues, that game let you pick who you wanted to be. You could role play in that game. So you have two major RPGs that have come out and have done role playing properly, and you decided to not, even though you're BioWare and that's your bread and butter theoretically. That is embarrassing. Good lord.
I mean, technically, you're still role playing. It's just that you're no longer being able to role play the character you want to be. You're role playing the character they've created for you.
Even a game like Kingdom Come Deliverance, where you're Henry. You can only play Henry.
Yeah.
However, your Henry can be a different kind of Henry.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of different Henrys you can be. So that sucks.
Yes.
Yeah,
it
like you
does.
said, you should have just made an action game. But then you couldn't put the Dragon Age sheen on it, the name, and try and sell it. Oh my god,
Well,
that
then
is the lame. Like that is evidence enough that BioWare is, I mean, just a shambling corpse. That alone, that you can't actually role play in a role playing game by BioWare.
Yes. This is basically after going through a bunch of different reviews on YouTube and whatnot. This is essentially the conclusion I've came to. The consensus I've seen collectively is the gameplay's kind of fun. It's fairly broken at launch. There's a lot of bugs and problems, and the story isn't that great because it basically narrows you down a path of playing the kind of good character that they think you should play, which makes it not very interesting when you have dialogue wheels that mean nothing when it comes to character interactions. And that's sort of what damages the story overall. And this game was in development, by the way, for about 10 years. And
So I mean, since the last one came out,
yeah, essentially. And there's been a huge amount of politics inserted into it, which is just alienating a lot of people who don't like those sorts of things. So then the question becomes, well, how is the game doing? Believe it or not, it's too early to tell if the game is very successful. So, but Googling around, I got just a flood of hype and positive, like, oh, this game's doing amazing. Here's one. Dragon Age Veilguard launch to the biggest ever single player game on Steam for Bethesda, for BioWare. Let's go to another article. Let's see. PC Games, which wants me to verify I'm not human, but I can get around it. The Veilguard beats Inquisition's Steam record by 500% in 1 hour. This game is killing it. Let's see, another article. Let's see, we got Forbes. Bringing up Forbes. Forbes says, Dragon Age The Veilguard sets EA BioWare player count record on Steam. The game's apparently one of the greatest games ever made. Let's go to Video Games Chronicles.
so exciting.
Video Games Chronicles. The Dragon Age Veilguard has debuted at the top of Steam top seller charts. And so I was like, oh, because apparently the only way we can measure whether or not the game is doing very well is on Steam. So I went and I was like, well, let's look it up, I guess. Here is the Steam charts at this moment. And the reason why I say at this moment is because it updates as time goes on. So here's the top trending games on Steam. Dragon Age isn't one of them. Top games by current players, by the amount of people playing the top games. Dragon Age isn't one of them. Top of all time, obviously Dragon Age isn't one of them. Elden Ring is one of the top of all time. So yeah, it's not the top at the moment. Well, let's see if we can't find any more accurate information, because I wanted to find out how well is this game doing. Because all of the news seems to be displaying that the game is just killing it. So here we have most played games at the moment. Counter-Strike 2 is the top. Stardew Valley is doing really well.
Oh.
How old is that game now?
What, 2016 did it come out, I think?
Yes, 2016, so like 8 years. So as far as I could tell, it is the top selling game at the moment. So good for them.
People are buying it but not playing it?
Yes, they are. Well, see, that's when it comes
Weird.
sort of curious is to go down the rabbit hole, because the only numbers we have are the Steam numbers, and the game peaked at an all-time of 84,832 players. So it's done fairly well on Steam, and all of the articles are like, well, it outdid the last Dragon Age. This is best doing BioWare game, and it's like, okay, by all accounts, it seems to be doing pretty well on Steam. The best I could be able to do is compare it to contemporaries, games that came out around the same, recently. Let's see, all-time of Wukong, 2,415,000. Okay, well, it's no Wukong all-time peak. How about we do Starfield? Starfield's all-time peak, 330,000. All-time peak.
That's not even in the same ballpark as what we're getting for Veilguard.
Cyberpunk, 1,054,000. All-time peak.
Oh.
Let's see, Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate all-time peak, 875,000. I know that this is format a little wanky. I'll fix it. And I'm going to bring up the rest of this, but clearly you see my point of like, I'm trying to bring up contemporaries to see how it compares.
Right.
Call of Duty, I believe this is 6, Black Ops 6, 491,000. Because there were articles saying, well, it's doing better in Call of Duty Black Ops, and it was like, no.
Yeah, I doubt that.
And this might seem a little pedantic, but what I'm trying to do is get down to whether or not it's being successful, because there's been a lot of articles claiming success. That are a little ambitious. So you might ask yourself, well, when it comes to, I'm going to pull this down. Well, it's still got time, essentially, that it could still go up. Believe it or not, games peak when they first come out. I'm going to do the all-time for Wukong, peak, and then decline. And if we open up all of the other ones, it will look the same. So I expect if the 84, whatever the number was, for Dragon Age doesn't go up more, that this is the peak, then it's not going to get any better. That if it doesn't peak in the next day or two more, so it seems to be doing fairly well with 80,000, so to speak, all-time players, which is pretty good, but it's not amazing if I'm comparing it to the contemporaries, especially when we look at Wukong, who peaked at 2.4 million.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was so confused as to why were all these articles just running around going like, this game is doing amazing. It's already peaked out the other Dragon Age game. And it's like, okay. Is it possible to make any conclusions as to whether or not the game's doing very well outside of the gate? No, we don't have any real numbers. We just know that Steam is selling fairly well, and it's peaked at 84,000. And somebody did the math on one of the Steam forums where they were estimating if the game costs about $150, which is apparently what the studio claimed, and it's probably more than that, that it would have to sell 2-3 million copies to even break even. And 84,000 is not going to make the game successful on Steam.
No, not in the slightest.
There's always going to be initial hype when a game comes out. It's just, I'm not invested in whether or not this game is successful. I'm just trying to report on whether or not it is successful.
Yeah, and the thing is too, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, Dragon Age was big on console too, but it was also a PC. Like BioWare and Dragon, like those were PC games. Like people also played them on PC. It's not like this is the first time Halo is put on PC, where like the numbers are like, because there's no history there. So like that's a little concerning. But I mean, but also again, we're only dealing with one side, and that's not even all of PC.
No.
People could still be getting it on the EA side of things, or
Yeah.
well, I don't know if GOG has it on there, but like there's
Microsoft
other
Store.
storefronts that could be getting it.
Yeah.
Well, and again, so who knows? But Steam is the biggest one of those bunch on PC, so the fact that it's at 84,000 on Steam is probably not great.
Yeah, it's not the number it needs to be. It's not actually killing it compared to its contemporaries. But as far as the numbers, it's all right. It's not bad. But there's no way to make any conclusions as to whether or not the game is just killing it. Because when I started looking it up, I was like, this game is the top selling game of all time. I started looking into it and I was like, I don't know if we could make that conclusion. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a bit
not
of
with any information we have.
We're right. There's a bit of propaganda on the news sites that seem to feel that they need this game to be successful. And I was like, I don't know if we can make that conclusion at the moment, if I'm being honest. On the other hand, there seems to be sites that seem to be invested in this game's failure. Comicbook.com, Dragon Age Veilguard user reviews on Metacritic are abysmal 2.6 out of 10.
Yikes.
Now, that was a temporary snapshot for Metacritic. So I went and found the Metacritic, and it currently, this is formatted wonky, so I'm just going to open it up. It's currently at 4.1 out of 10 for the user reviews, with only 52 critic reviews at 84. So it doesn't seem to be universally praised as far as reviews are concerned. And then it's
one of your initial comments to me was a big red flag in the about the game, and that was when you asked about whether or not it was successful, and you're like, we can't tell.
Yeah.
I would say that with a game like this that needs to be successful, that needs to make millions back, at this point, if we can't tell, that to me is like a real big red flag right there. It's like,
it might be.
It's
not crashing and burning like a Concorde. Like immediately we knew Concorde was just failing.
The beautiful tragedy.
Yeah.
True. But, I mean, can you really say that it's doing well if we're saying we can't tell right now? That to me is like, whoa, that's really shaky ground right there.
Well, here's an IGN article. Veilguard launches and beats Jedi Survivor to make EA's biggest ever single-player game on Steam, though. Why? Because we have no other numbers. So they are obsessing over whether or not the game is being successful on Steam in order to prove that the game is being successful. I'm saying we can't make that conclusion if we compare it to its contemporaries, unless the game does amazingly bigger numbers. It may have peaked at this point because games seem to peak and then bleed off after the beginning. That's all I can say. It seemed to have done pretty well on Steam out the gate, but that doesn't belie its longevity or increased sales. And 85,000 isn't enough to carry this game alone. 84 or whatever it is.
Oh. Hey, can you pull up the numbers for Jedi Survivor? Or whatever.
For Steam, let me find that.
Yeah.
Let's see. Jedi Survivor. Uh, 87,000 about for a peak all time. And it once again, if you look at Max, peak at the beginning, bleed off after that.
Yeah.
Jedi Survivor was this the first or the second game?
Second one.
Yeah, it didn't do as well as the first, was my understanding.
Yeah.
And I played both of them. I prefer the first game. The first game's really good.
Yeah.
So once again, I mean, it's on par, like give or take a couple 10,000, but it's not a massive difference between the two as far as success is concerned. And Survivor was kind of mediocre sales wise. I don't think
I
it's
was
going to
gonna
be
say,
a massive
consider
failure
Survivor
as far as I could tell that we can glean from the Steam, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a massive success. And my estimation is that Dragon Age probably cost a lot more to make than Jedi Survivor.
Oh yeah,
Probably.
all but guaranteed.
And then you might go, oh, well, what was the fallout of this game coming out? Well, when we looked at those clips of the misgendering the character and whatnot, apparently a lot of those clips that were coming out early, BioWare was trying to remove them from the internet from people seeing them.
Oh my god,
That's not a good sign.
That's a good sign.
great sign.
Yeah.
Then we've had journalists trying to push back against people attempting to gaslight game. Let's read what she had to say. Hello, game consultant here. The idea that consultants are forcing diversity in games is ridiculous because 99% of the time the devs have already decided they want their games to be inclusive. I just want to help fine-tune how certain stories come across. Hope this helps. There's been a lot of conversation and pushback against DEI stuff because Dragon Age Veilguard is a champion of the DEI stuff wholeheartedly. Another
Well,
quote, the fact that this
that-
has been... Go ahead, Jason.
I was going to say, considering that Sweet Baby Inc. and their founder has come out and said, we push this,
Oh, yeah.
it seems to belie her saying, no, we're not pushing this. And it's like, we've got some direct evidence that says you totally are. So you don't really have a leg to stand on here.
Emma goes on to say the fact that this has been brought up again in reference to Dragon Age Veilguard is particularly laughable, have the people throwing these forced DEI allegations around ever actually played a BioWare game. DEI is new. I have played most BioWare games. DEI was a bit in Inquisition, but it wasn't so much of a problem with most other games. What is that stupid thing? Mass Effect Andromeda was definitely a DI infected game. I have played these games.
Oh yeah.
The other ones not so much. The other Mass Effects. By the way, and I'm not going to bring it up, but I'm just going to say this off the bat. The person who did the team that's doing Mass Effect is distancing themselves from Dragon Age, which isn't necessarily a good sign.
Oh.
No, it's not.
Oh.
And by the way, they're distancing themselves because, believe it or not, we are not getting DLC for Dragon Age. They flat out said that the whole team is moving into Mass Effect. So,
Oh my god.
So yes. Oh, and by the way, to give you an idea of Dragon Age Veilguard's massive success, the beta for Monster Hunter Wilds is beating Dragon Age Veilguard on Steam.
Oh my gosh.
Do you know
Beta?
why? Do you know why?
I'm
Because
sorry.
you can have your cat buddy, your Palico, if you
Yeah.
will,
Yeah.
and you can go get some cooking done by the cat chefs. Game rules. I love Monster Hunter games. They're cool. This game looks like it
Cat
blows.
Apparently, I don't care much about Asmongold, but apparently he's been banned from the Dragon Age subreddit.
And I guarantee you that was pure. Like he wasn't even going there. They just did it preemptively. I guarantee
Yeah,
it.
probably.
There also was allegedly discriminating hiring practices against men because they wanted people to parrot and embrace the ideology that the higher-ups demanded in BioWare. So there are discriminating hiring practice allegations against BioWare at the moment. I wouldn't be shocked if
Legal.
those played out. I mean, how much more can we say? There's no way to tell exactly where this is going. We're going to have to wait for more concrete numbers. So far, it seems to be
Yep.
doing okay. Any claims that it's doing gangbusters is a little premature.
Oh god, yeah. They just really want it to be. And at least it's not falling and tripping over its own dick like Concord or some of these really horrendous failures recently.
Dustborn.
But
Oh, and
Yeah,
one
Dustborn.
article, now that we're bringing up Concord, I'm going to bring this up really quickly. And any idea that Concord is coming back is probably not going to happen because the team that made Concord has been shuttered.
We did not hit our targets with this title. Really? You
Yeah,
don't say.
yeah.
Hmm.
They're either being moved to other places, or some people might just be let go or whatever. But yeah, the team that made Concord is no longer exists. They have shuttered that development company, Firewalk Studios.
Oof. That's a big oofty.
Yeah.
I found a really interesting article I'd like to bring up. And it's a former Disney executive. This is not the article. I don't care about Sweet Baby. They always have something dumb to say. I'm going to bring it up. There we go. Former Disney executive talks about Hollywood's collapse and puts the blame on DEI. She has some interesting things to say. So she was in this interview with, I'm getting this from that Park Place, but former Disney executive Monica Harris recently explained why Hollywood was collapsing and put the blame squarely on DEI initiatives. She began by pointing to Target. I think the reason we see no course correction is the same reason we see Target market items. I think we know which items I'm talking about that clearly don't appeal to consumers. I think when you have like trans Cheerios and stuff like that, that you're making a statement that has nothing to do with your audience and its tastes. Harris continued, what we've seen in the corporate world, and I'm going somewhere with this, what we've seen as the corporate world is this fastidious and slavish adherence to ESG, environmental social governance, principles which are really just DI in practice, in products, and in hiring in the corporate world. So these corporations are pursuing these marketing tactics and sales tactics which produce with products that are doomed to flop and do flop and that lower shareholder value, but they continue with them nonetheless. And the deeper I've been digging, and especially my work at FAIR, the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, which I'll talk about later, but the deeper I've been digging, I've noticed that this is happening because the same core group of companies are largely funding or have shareholder stakes, majority shareholder stakes in Fortune 500 companies. And in S&P 500, we're talking about BlackRock, we're talking about Vanguard, we're talking about State Street. When these three companies and their subsidiaries dominate boards of directors and dominate the ownership of stock, then they literally are in a position to tell these companies to adhere to whatever guidelines they like. So if DEI is an initiative that these major shareholders would like companies to pursue, that's what they'll pursue. Because if not, then they'll face the wrath of the people who can yank the money, yank the loans, and yank the funding because it's all about money. So at the end of the day, you're in, if you're a CEO, you're like, do I piss off the consumer base and maybe hope I can massage them, or do I piss off the people who are actually funding me? And they're between a rock and a hard place, Harris observed. This is a very well-reasoned and well-observed take by a former executive at Disney. This is what we've been talking about from the beginning, that this is why politics has been inserted in everything, is because these three major companies have agendas and they've been forcing them into companies that they have investments in. And these companies know that the products are going to be a failure, but they do it anyway because they're in basically enraging the consumer base because they know that they're not going to be successful because nobody wants the products that are coming out. Basically from the
well, and it seems to confirm a lot of because that's been the theory for a while, is that like, well, the reason they're doing it is they're getting money from outside sources by doing this. And now it's, I mean, she was on the inside more than anyone else that we actually know of. I mean, you have all these different people with their sources, quote unquote, but obviously they can't say who they are. But now this is very much confirming what has been theorized already, and it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, that these companies are, I mean, are they chasing a dime, like, throwing away a dollar to chase a dime? I don't know. I mean, probably, certainly in a long-term sense, I think they absolutely are, because they're damaging their brand.
Yeah.
To the point where I don't think a lot of at least the IP brands, possibly even their own. I mean, think of a company like Sony. Dude, I mean, other than the occasional hit with Spider-Man, specifically ones that are involved with Marvel now, what do they bring that people really truly want to see? I mean, people clowned on Sony so hard they brought Morbius back to theaters.
Yeah,
Like,
because it was a joke.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't even have anything to do with DEI, I guess, really, but it's certainly like this is the damage you can do, and they're doing it over and over and over again to chase money that, I mean, A, isn't permanent, and B, is going to damage the long-term value of themselves. It's so strange. I mean, but it's a very business-oriented, short-term thinking.
Yes.
Like, that's... And we'll see how it goes. I mean, we can already see where it's going for a lot of these companies. I mean, it's damaging in the nth degree.
Well, and this is how we get Dragon Age. This is how we get Concord. This is how we get Dustborn. This is how we get Assassin's Creed Shadows. This is how we get all of these games. It's not because there's a large user demand. It's because at the very top on these large corporations that have their fingers in a lot of the different companies are passing down from the top. You need to do more DEI centered stuff. And it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but we actually have video of the CEO of BlackRock saying we need to force behavior. If they're not going to do it on their own, we need to force it because they have values that they want to push. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is literally what's happening. And we have a Disney executive saying this is actually what's happening. We're making products nobody wants. And we're doing it anyway because we're told from these big investors that we have to.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is really kind of, I mean, it's so short-sighted.
Yes.
Because they're getting these investors that are saying you got to do this. But at the same time, Disney knows that the money they're getting from these investors is not going to equal what they'll get from the consumer.
It's worse than that. BlackRock controls who's on their board.
Well, does this partially explain the ballooning budgets too of the last 10 years?
Yeah, because they promised.
Hey, it's free money, pal.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll just put it. Well, use it up, whatever. I mean, in addition to the shareholder like sort of thing, but like, it makes me wonder. I mean, because even at least with these big movies like your Avengers films, especially the last couple, or whatever, like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like big budget, it's you built up to this, sure. But I mean, first run of TV shows like She-Hulk and The Acolyte, and like, or God, even like the Book of Boba Fett and stuff, where you're just spending millions per episode.
Yeah.
For why? Like, what? You haven't established any of this, and you're burning that kind of money? Good Lord.
Because they insert people into their boards, they own huge chunks of the company, and they have an outsized say into what the company does. This is what we said when we did that massive conversation about Sweet Baby Inc. And I was like, Sweet Baby Inc. is just this DI consulting company, like, because everybody turned into this Gamergate. It's like, oh, Sweet Baby Inc. They're just nefarious. It's like, it's not Sweet Baby Inc. It's who is above them that is pushing these initiatives. Sweet Baby Inc. is basically the company that gives you the DEI cred so that you can get investment from BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street.
Yeah,
and whatnot.
I was gonna say, like, honestly, I admire the hustle as far as they're concerned.
It is a hustle on there,
like,
and it's
because
like
they're not the ones pushing it. They're
well,
just giving you the way to get the money.
Goes away. There's like 20 other ones I guarantee you that we don't know about.
Absolutely, and people say the same people. It doesn't even matter if it's the same people from Sweet Baby Inc. and it's just renamed. They literally, their plane could crash in like a horrible Buddy Holly way, and there will be 5 other companies like the next day that will be putting their stamp on games and movies or whatever. Like, it's because it's, why wouldn't you? I mean, honestly, if I had even remotely the bona fides to pull something like that, I mean, that's good money, boy. I don't blame them. Like, hey, get that money, get that bag.
Get that bag. Well, it confirms everything we've already known about that we talked about on this podcast to an extensive degree. At any rate, In good news, Ross, Toho's announced that Godzilla Minus One director is going to be helming the next film.
Yeah.
Nice.
We're going to get a
Yes.
Godzilla Minus One
Hell
sequel.
yeah. I am so excited. That is awesome. That
Starring
fucking rules.
me.
Starring Silver.
Starring Val.
You'll be the one that Godzilla beats.
No.
In additional news, Indiana Jones: The Great Circle to feature a disclaimer clarifying that the developer Machine Games' decision to use Nazis as enemies should not be in any way construed to condone, glorify, or endorse their ideology. Does that really need to be said? Do you really need to have a
In an
disclaimer
Indiana
that
Jones game?
the bad guys in this game are bad? We don't like the bad guys that are clearly the bad guys in this game. Do you really need to say this?
Well, and of all games in Indiana Jones, like hello, like obviously, like, oh my god, I mean,
How stupid is that?
I don't even know where to start. I don't.
Even like a disclaimer would make more sense if this was like you're fighting the thuggies. But even then, that's dumb. Like, oh my god, this is so stupid. That is
But
the worst.
the natural conclusion is yes, the Nazis are bad because they're the bad guys in the game, and they've always been the
Yep.
bad guys. Like they're the bad guys.
Absolutely.
No one would assume
Good
you support
God.
them because you've displayed them negatively in your game. The assumption would be you don't like them.
That is hilarious.
That's really dumb. Venom seems to have a mediocre release. Opening weekend, 51
Oh.
million, and moving into the next week of a 20 million. It's a so-so
Did,
reception to the final Venom film, which was already
Did it have a better
mediocre.
opening than Joker 2?
I think it did.
Oh, that's oh my
Joker
god.
2 is in its 40s, I want to say.
Yeah. And obviously it completely trounced Borderlands. I mean, oh wow.
Yeah.
I mean, is anyone surprised by that though? I mean, those Venom movies have just been kind of coasting.
I saw the first one and it was mediocre, and I never saw the second one.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Hardy.
Yeah,
can
the
only
first one
carry
was
so
okay.
much.
The second one, I did see the second one, and it just didn't. I mean, it didn't even live up to the first one. And the first one was just okay.
Especially when the first one's mediocre and you don't live up to that reputation.
Yeah.
Silver, you see every horrible movie. What do you think of Venom?
Yes, I have seen the second one because, of course.
Uh-huh.
I don't even know what to say about it. The first one is like, okay, fine. Second one, yeah, it's worse. But it wasn't like unwatchable, I'd say. It was just like, yeah, it's a mover.
Do you have any plans
It's
to
not
see
one
the
I
third
actively
one?
want to see again. No, I completely
He
forgot
probably
about
doesn't have
that.
any plans, but Kaiju Dad will take her to it.
Kaiju Dad, yeah.
Your Kaiju Dad will purchase it.
Well, you know what? Let's move
We'll see-
on.
we'll see it sometime.
Yeah. An article for Ross. Quentin Tarantino has praised Joker 2. Says Joaquin Phoenix gives one of the best performances I've ever seen in my life. It said, F you to comic book geeks in Hollywood. What do you think about that, Ross? Seeing as how me and you famously did a multi-hour review of Joker 2.
We did. I mean, Quentin Tarantino's kind of a contrarian, not entirely, but he's always been that way. I seem to remember him saying in this that the director, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, Todd Phillips, there we go,
Yeah.
was the Joker himself. And that, he was like, I seem to recall him saying something like that in one of the quotes.
Once
I saw.
again,
And
the commentary is this is some sort of meta when it comes to
Right.
the audience. Like, everybody recognizes that's what's happening in this film. And we even said in our review, that's an interesting thing to do for a movie. I don't know if that's successful when people have expectations because it's called Joker and it's in a universe that's already established. I read a...
and the thing is, even if you really like that, that's interesting once.
Yes.
That's not worth a repeat.
Well, I was reading on the Joker Folia Do subreddit where people are on there is like, what people don't realize is that you're Harley Quinn. You're the one that's obsessed. It's like, yeah, we know that. Because he's saying it like there's this meta underneath that you don't understand. It's like, no, we understand that. We disagree with the meta.
Yeah.
That's because you don't get it's so clever. They're commenting on the audience. It's like, no, I understand. I think it's bad though. I don't think
stupid.
I don't think that's good. I understand the meta. And it's such a well done troll on the audience, which is weird. Hey, I guess what? Joaquin Phoenix does a really good job. He's amazing.
He
in
does,
the movie.
genuinely.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Quentin Tarantino's
I
not
mean,
wrong.
I agree with Quentin Tarantino. Yeah, like Tarantino's right. But isn't saying that like Todd Phillips, the director, is like the Joker, and I mean, if you're talking about that Joker, especially
He's
in that
the one.
movie, isn't
He's
that a
the
bit
real
of a,
Joker trolling you.
Isn't that kind of a screw you? Because
Yes,
the Joker sucks.
but
isn't that an FU to Todd Phillips?
See, that's the funny thing. He's in on the meta of it being a commentary on fandom and stuff, and it's like, okay, I disagree with that commentary is the problem.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I get it. I know that's all we talked about was the meta, essentially.
Yeah, and that's it is all that movie can be, because by itself it is nothing.
Yeah,
and it's the only interesting part of it because of that.
All it does is want to talk about what you thought about the first one and that it was wrong.
Yes.
Yes. At any rate, Hasbro is laying off dozens of employees and it might move to Massachusetts.
Oh no. Hey Rhett, I hate to do this to you, but I got to head. I gotta get up really early, so.
No, but whatever.
Goodbye, everybody. Enjoy talking about poor Hasbro. Bye.
Yeah, we're almost done anyway. But bye. Just not a good sign for Hasbro. It doesn't look like. Moving on. An interesting sign. California Governor Gavin Newsom is proposing more than double the state's film and tax incentives to get more people to film in Hollywood. Because if you recall, most people tend to go to other places to film things, like Georgia, where most of the Marvel movies were filmed. The taxes are too high. That's what nobody films in California anymore. That's why. And that should tell you why most of Hollywood actually doesn't exist in Hollywood anymore, that they've all moved away to film in other places like Georgia. They film in England. There's a lot of tax incentives to film in England and also in Canada as well. I don't think this is going to change the direction of filmmaking, that people are going to suddenly return to California. The taxes are too high. Nobody wants to live there.
Yeah. There's a studio in China that if you film there, they will build whatever set you want for free, apparently.
Well, because there's big incentive to bring these companies. That's one thing that never made any sense. The reason why they initially filmed movies in Hollywood is because it was cheap to film there, and the climate was such that you could film year-round.
Yep.
You could film in the winter and still film movies. You basically just film all the time. But as California became sort of the established location where everybody did stuff in Hollywood, the assumption then goes, well, everybody's going to stay here, and we're going to be able to, charge whatever we want because this is where everybody goes to film movies. And it's like, okay, then they'll move to Georgia, which is where pretty much every Marvel movie filmed in Georgia. Like, if you watch the credits, it's always that little Georgia peach at the bottom of the credits sort of thing.
That's one of the things that always gets me about the way people make economic decisions. It's like they think that just because it started out as they're on top, that they don't need to do anything to stay there. And they can do whatever they want because they'll always be on top.
Or encourage incentives to keep you around, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, they'll never leave. It's like, they will. They're gonna.
Yep.
In political related news, Jason, you might be hyped for this because you're a Fortnite person. Fortnite has a complete map released that's a Kamala Harris Fortnite map it's called Freedom Town, and you could go around and look at stuff that's basically parts of her platform and learn about things that are in her platform in Fortnite. Because, the Fortnite audience are the type of people that are going to super vote.
Yeah, all the 12-year-olds.
All the 12-year-olds
So gonna vote.
Freedom Town with Big Harris Waltz. Stuff on a Fortnite map. So, politics entering Fortnite. Get hyped for that. And we are going to end with the creative director of the upcoming Wolverine game has left the Wolverine game because of creative differences and is going to head up the new Perfect Dark. Which isn't a good sign for Wolverine. Perhaps a good sign for Perfect Dark?
Well, I guess it really depends on what these creative differences were.
He doesn't say. I tried to look for something, and it was basically creative differences. Which tells me that they had a different view of the direction the game was going, and they did not agree, so he left. Which is, apparently there was enough of a difference of perspective for him to want to leave, so there was contention there, one would assume.
It's one of those things that at this point in time, it makes me wonder, because of and this goes back to what you were talking about earlier about the political scene bleeding into the entertainment industry.
Yes.
It's like, was the director too woke or not woke enough? You know what I mean?
I don't know what conclusion we could come to, but I'm not.
Yeah.
It's funny. You would see a new game announcement. It's like a new Wolverine game coming out. You'd be like, oh, Wolverine. But it's like now when you announce it, you're like, I don't think they're going to do a good job. Like my initial assumption is always it's going to suck. and then
somehow it's not.
Well, yeah. And then on top of that, my assumption is if he's leaving, it goes, well, that's also not a good sign.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that plays out.
It's one of those things where now you can't. In the past, it used to be like, well, they left over creative differences, and it almost meant nothing at that point. It was
somebody didn't like somebody else who was in charge, sort of thing.
Yeah, but now it's like, whenever they're saying something like that, you're like, ooh, that's a bad sign.
Yeah, because you don't know if it's like disagreement over the political messaging in the game or direction or whatever. It's hard to guess anymore.
Did they make Wolverine too masculine?
Yeah, it's possible that was a disagreement. That's super on the table. At any rate, that's. Was that Jason?
I was going to say it could have been as simple as something like he wanted to do an RPG and they wanted to do an action game.
Maybe. Is that enough to leave over?
But right. But because of the political situation, a lot of times now we just jump straight to the politics.
When I leave this podcast, it'll just be political, or it'll be creative differences that I'll list.
Yeah.
We're sorry to announce Tourette has left due to creative difference.
Poochie had to go back to his home planet.
Yeah.
At any rate, it's been a fun time. Everybody just calm down. I know the election's looming like a great black cloud. Everybody calm down. Take a deep breath. Go out for a walk. One person getting elected doesn't mean that suddenly large explosions and fire will rain from the sky. The day will be the exact same the moment somebody is delineated as chosen as it was the moment before that. So we're all going to be fine. You're all going to be fine. Final thoughts for the day, Silver.
With every day that passes, I'm continued to be more disappointed in games. And it's not getting better. I am sad.
Silver is sad. Jason?
Well, I know this really isn't going to mean anything for anybody but me. But I think, let's see, it was the 15th. the 15th, a Kickstarter launched for an RPG based on Discworld, which is one of my favorite authors and one of my favorite series. And it ends next week, and they've already raised more than they've raised almost £2 million for the RPG. So
Well, good for them. I
there's some
wouldn't
good things
say
going around.
I wouldn't say that's Pratchett, isn't it?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say Discworld would lend itself to an RPG. It's more comedic and confusing. I don't know, meta world where they live on the back of a tortoise.
They're actually trying to do some different things with the rules and stuff to fit that world better than a traditional tabletop RPG. So we'll see. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't.
All right. Well, let's end this podcast. Everybody be hopeful. We're getting out of here. Goodbye. Goodbye.
If you like the show, follow Rhett, Jason, Ross, and Silver, the world's most lethally stupid internet personalities, on Twitter at DGPodcast or on Instagram at DistractedGamers. If you liked or hated what you heard here today, you can email them at thedistractedgamers@gmail.com and share your feelings. Not that Jason would care, since he hasn't any, of course.
Oh my God, it's so juicy!